Today is September the 12th. We are at the Department of Consumer Affairs building on 1747 North Market Boulevard, Sacramento. The time is 1:01, and we'd like to call the meeting to order. And Christina, let's check and make sure we have a quorum.
Okay, I'm going to take roll now. Good afternoon, board members. Vic Stout.
Here.
Christina Wong.
Here.
Betty Conley.
Here.
Dr. Peter Chu.
Here.
Dr. Christine Whittlesbach.
Here.
Alexander Kim.
Here.
Dr. Leah Brew.
Here.
Gabriel Lamb.
Here.
And for the record, we have 3 absentees. Deborah Brown, Max DeSosti, Jonathan Maddox. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Do we want to go ahead? I want to go ahead and have the board members introduce themselves with their roles, please.
So you can say your name and
I'm new. I'm new. I'm Vic Stout. I'm a LMFT.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Christina Wong, LCSW member.
Betty Conley, LEP member.
Peter Chu, public member.
Christine Whittlesbach, I'm a public member.
Alexander Kim, public member.
Leah Brew, LPCC member.
Gabriel Lamb, LCSW member, also LPCC.
Thank you. So without further ado, do we have any public comment for items not on the agenda for today? Okay, seeing none, are there any suggestions for future agenda items? Okay, then we'll go ahead and move for our first petitioner. Shall I pass this over at this point to our honorable judge? And I didn't catch your name, I'm sorry.
Marilyn Woolard, thank you. And the first petitioner will be Sharon Leslie Bain. Ma'am, if you'd go ahead and approach and have a seat, thank you. Is it possible to get the sound turned up a little bit for the court reporter and for, I think, all of our benefits? Is that better? Okay. All right. Good afternoon. We're on the record before the Board of Behavioral Sciences, Department of Consumer Affairs, State of California, and we're here today in the matter of the petition for early termination of probation filed by Sharon Leslie Bain. This is agency case 2002-14001-296. Office of Administrative Hearings, case 2018-080-342. Today is September the 12th, 2018. It's approximately 1:05 a.m. p.m. My name is Marilyn Woolard. I'm an administrative law judge with the Office of Administrative Hearings, and I'm here to help assist the board in this matter. And I'd like to ask each of the board members to identify themselves for the record, beginning on my right with Ms. Stout.
Christina Wong, LCSW member.
Betty Conley, LEP. Betty Conley, LEP member.
Peter Chu, public member.
Christine Whittlesbach, public member.
Alexander Kim, public member.
Leah Brew, LPCC member.
Gabriel Lamb, LCSW member.
Thank you. And there is a quorum of the board present here today. May I have the appearance on behalf of the Deputy Attorney General?
Yes, my name is Karen Denver. I'm a Deputy Attorney General appearing on behalf of the Attorney General pursuant to Government Code Section 1152, representing the people of the state of California.
Thank you. And Ms. Bain, you're here today and you're representing yourself, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You do understand you have a right to be represented by counsel at your own expense?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. We did have a little bit of a discussion off the record, and you indicated to me that you did not bring any additional documents today. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you intend to testify on your own behalf, but you don't have any additional witnesses.
That's correct.
All right, thank you. Just briefly to give you an overview, in this matter, the board is particularly concerned with the rehabilitation efforts that you have engaged in since your license was placed on probation. Ms. Denver, the Deputy Attorney General, will first give us an overview of the evidence and orientation in this matter. After that is concluded, I'll place you under oath, and you'll have an opportunity to testify on your own behalf and address the board. When you've said what you'd like to say, Ms. Denver may have some questions for you. The board members may have some questions for you. And when that's concluded, I'll give you an opportunity to add any additional testimony that may have triggered. And you did mention that you're a little nervous today, and you have some notes that you might be using to help orient yourself, and that's fine. All right, so when we're concluded with that matter, the board, actually with the 3 petitions that we're here to address today, the board will go into an executive closed session to make a decision. So you won't receive your decision today, you'll receive it in the mail at a future time. Understood?
Absolutely understood.
Okay, any questions on how we're going to proceed?
No, ma'am.
All right, thank you. All right, the court reporter is still having a difficulty hearing. If we could.
Increase the volume, it will get a feedback.
Okay.
And
Just the best you can do.
you might have to sit down in a different area with the
No,
speaker joining.
it should be okay, just allow us, you can turn it without feedback.
It is loud, it just didn't need to get closer to them.
So you're suggesting that each member pull the microphone closer to them?
Please.
All right, thank you. And also, I noticed, Ms. Bain, you were sort of craning into the microphone. Why don't you bring the microphone towards you so you don't strain yourself? Good idea. All right, is that better, sir? All right. All right, so Ms. Denver, if this would be an appropriate time for you to provide your overview of the evidence in this matter.
Okay, thank you. As I stated, I am appearing on behalf of the people of the state of California, and I'm here to assist the panel in fact-finding. My role is not adversarial, but is intended to protect the public interest. And to give you the background for this case, a statement of issues was filed on February 14th, 2013, denying the petitioner's application.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm trying to make a record, I can't hear what they're talking.
Okay.
I have a blank spot. What's the year?
February 14th, 2013, denying petitioner's application for a marriage and family therapist intern registration based on 2 criminal convictions. One was a 2005 wet reckless conviction, a misdemeanor for driving under the influence of prescription medications. And the second was a 2011 DUI conviction for having consumed, again, prescription medications. Pursuant to a stipulated settlement, the petitioner was issued the registration on August 21st, 2013, and was placed on probation for a period of 5 years with optional and standard conditions including psychological evaluation, ongoing psychotherapy, abstain from alcohol and drugs, random urinalysis, dependency support group, and to complete 2 semester units in drug use and abuse. On April 14th, 2014, the petitioner tested positive for alcohol. A petition to revoke probation was filed on July 10, 2014. Following an administrative hearing, respondent's probation was revoked, stayed, and she was placed on 5 years of probation effective March 20, 2015, and therefore probation is set to end on March 20, 2020. Because the burden is on the petitioner, I have no further statements but would reserve the right to question the petitioner.
Thank you. And Ms. Denver, would you like to review the documents
Yes.
are provided here today?
Your Honor, in the binder in front of you, a copy of which has been provided to Ms. Bain, the first item is the notice of hearing. The second item is the license history certification. The third item is an amended proposed decision and order, the petition to revoke probation, and the stipulated settlement and disciplinary order involving the statement of issues. Exhibit 4 is Ms. Bain's petition for early termination of probation, along with the attachments she provided. Exhibit 5 contains quarterly psychotherapy reports, and Exhibit 6 contains a psychological evaluation. As we discussed off the record, I am making a motion to submit items 5 and 6 under a protective seal.
And Ms. Bain, the purpose of that seal is to protect confidential medical information from Public Records Act disclosures. It seems appropriate to me, based upon my knowledge of the circumstances of those exhibits. Do you have any objection to placing a seal order on Exhibits 5 and 6?
I do not.
All right, it will be so ordered. And let me also ask you, Ms. Bain, do you have any objection to the consideration of Exhibits 1 through 6 for the purpose of this hearing?
No, I do not.
All right, Exhibits 1 through 6 are admitted. So, Ms. Bain, I'd like to ask you at this time to please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth and the whole truth?
Yes, I do.
All right, thank you. So you don't have an attorney, you're representing yourself, so you don't have the typical question-answer format, but I'll just allow you to address the board in a narrative fashion. Obviously, they've received your packet and reviewed that, but this would be an opportunity to highlight what you believe you've accomplished during your rehabilitation and why your petition should be granted.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. You can proceed and let me know when you're ready for some questions. This would be your opportunity to provide testimony.
Presentation?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to all of you for giving me this opportunity to hear me. I have to admit that when I was first placed on probation, especially at my age, I wasn't happy. I was resentful and resistant. But I said I needed to do this in order to continue on as a marriage family therapist intern and then eventually get licensed because it's my passion. So it was difficult for me being resentful and having to get up and be in compliance, but I did it. And oddly enough, over about a 2-3 year period, something began to change. And I began to recognize that there was something I needed to really look at. And it was, I needed to look at my own accountability, being accountable. Currently, I am under the realm of my synagogue, so I am accountable to I'm accountable to God. I'm accountable to my rabbi. I'm accountable to the elders. I'm accountable to the congregation and the people I serve, and of course you. But I needed to learn to be accountable for myself, and that was something new. So it's kind of odd that I'm here actually with some gratitude because change began to take place. And first of all, I mean, maybe this doesn't matter as far as being a marriage family therapist, but I've lost 50 pounds. I've got into health and nutrition. I began to do things to empower myself as a person, as a human being, and began to take care of body, mind, and soul, which is, to me, the completion of what we're all looking at as a therapist. And therefore, through that, it's been wonderful to be able to share that experience in a way that you're not sharing your own personal experience, but just in the way that you hold yourself accountable with your clients and with day-to-day people. So what I have done is I've now actually started a series with the Empowering Women videos, which is helping to other women and people encourage themselves. And that's to be humble to myself, to show you what the struggles that I've been through, to really take a look at that and really take a look at being honest with yourself. It's been a long road. And like I said, at first I was not happy with it. But now where I am, it's where I feel I need to be and where I can be accountable to myself. And so that's what I've done. That's who I am. So I thank you for this opportunity. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. Thank you.
Thank you. Why don't we begin, Ms. Denver, if you have any specific questions.
Thank you. Ms. Bain, you have approximately 1.5 years left on your probation. Why are you seeking to terminate your probation now?
Simply because I'm looking at, I'm 62. The cost of all this, I am still in volunteership mode for I have not completed my licensure. I will be studying for the licensure in the next few months. But all of this, being just upfront, that the cost of this is an extraordinary amount every month, as you know. It's also there is no desire, the purpose was to rehabilitate, to change one's behavior and in one's mind, and I've done that. As far as taking steps with any medications and different things, I've even have it charted in with my doctors, never give me too much medication, because I just don't want to put myself at that risk at all, and I will not. But there is no, that has changed for me. I want to eat healthy and be healthy. So it's because I'm living this lifestyle that is healthy, it just seems like I'm paying money out at this point for probation. That is what the purpose was, to keep me on probation. I'm already doing that, and I have been consistent with that for a long time now.
And do you feel you have a problem with substance abuse?
I feel that I did. I feel that that there will always be a pull, and that I have to be aware of that. So that awareness is why I put things in place, such as placing in the doctor's charts, never give her any too much of an amount. It's all in my doctor's charts. I put that there purposely. I have people that I'm accountable to in my synagogue, that if I'm not on the right track, if I'm too tired, they will ask me to go on a sabbatical. It is monitoring myself, and I have people that I surround myself that keep me accountable as well. So it is something that I will always have. I mean, when you have something that affects your dopamine and your serotonin levels, you're always aware of that, but you do have a way, you do have a choice, and those choices are not, my choice is to not go down that path anymore.
And are you currently in a 12-step program?
Yes.
Will you continue to participate in that program if your probation is ended?
Yes.
And I know the board members probably have questions for you, so I'll keep this fairly short, but what assurances can you give the board that you would not repeat this kind of conduct in the future?
The assurance that I guess there's no 100% assurance of anything, but I can tell you today, where I am today, and which has been consistent through, I would say, the past couple of years, is that I am fully engaged in taking care of myself. So that even the thought of alcohol, you may laugh, but I think of bloated ankles now, of bloating. When I think of using drugs, I think, a prescription narcotic, I think of constipation. I'm sorry, I'm just going to be honest with you. So I don't have that same feeling of I need to interject that place of euphoria through that. What makes me euphoric is to go in and do some cardio. So if if that's the addictive part, I think that that's a very, very healthy lifestyle, and that's what I actually used to be before any of this had transpired in my life. I had done that for 25 years, taking care of myself, and kind of slipped into a bad place. Mm-hmm.
And as far as any medications that you are taking now, you do realize that even if medication is prescribed to you, that if it impairs your ability to drive, that you cannot drive with that medication in your system?
Absolutely, and one of the things I'd like to say is I am currently off the anti-anxiety medication because of my exercise. So I said hallelujah to that. And I am only on now my antidepressant, which I take, and my high cholesterol. Everything else I'm off of, so that's been good.
Your Honor, I'm going to let the board members ask questions, and then I'll follow up if there's anything. I know there's a lot of people, and they might have questions.
All right, thank you. Then at this time, beginning with you, Ms. Stout, do you have any questions for Ms. Ban?
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Ms. Wong?
Welcome to come in. So you talked about a little bit about, that you admit that you have a substance abuse issue.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit more about what your past pattern, how long you used, your sobriety date, and your relationship with the substance abuse? Can you talk a little bit more?
I don't have a sobriety date. I'm sorry. I'm just one of those people that never picked one. The substance abuse that we have is I got into a neck injury when I was a deputy sheriff back in 2004, I believe. And they had placed me on leave because I also suffer from generalized anxiety disorder. So the psychiatrist had put me on a anti-anxiety, and I was also placed on pain medication. I was on that for a period of about 6 months. And unfortunately, they really gave a lot of it. And there was no stopping it, no monitoring it. And it made me feel good. And at that point, that's where that sort of began. And I had a very difficult time looking at that as being a problem because I felt this happened because of a medical issue. And so it's the doctor's fault. It's everybody else's fault but my own. The next time is when I had taken, which you'll see in my letter, I had taken Ambien at night in my own bed. We had a lot of things going on. Now, here's the responsibility for my own self. My mother was dying, and I had found out my husband had an affair. Not a good thing to find out in one day. So I just wanted to go to sleep. But the interesting thing that I have to look at is that I used the Ambien to go to sleep early. Not the fact that the Ambien was taken appropriately and taken in the evening in my house, but the fact of what it was utilized for. And I have to look at that. I will never take Ambien again, I'll tell you that. But I wound up in handcuffs from that point on. So I did not have any idea, honestly, of what had transpired, how I got in the car. It was, one of those things that it was just very odd. I was in bed, and the next thing I was in handcuffs. So we fought it because the law does stipulate if, while unconscious, you can't be, you can't be found guilty of a crime. Well, they found me guilty, and I accepted that, and I accepted everything that went along with that. I wasn't happy about it. I'm going to tell you, I was resentful. That's just the truth. How could they? I was on Ambien. However, my responsibility in this is that I took it because I was upset. You can't take a drug because you're upset. You have to go through what you're upset about and figure it out. The drug only numbs it. The alcohol only numbs it. You must address what you're being upset about. So it's learning to go through that. So that's actually those two incidents, how they began. And so I have to look at even my eating. I mean, I know this doesn't count for the board, but my gosh, Haagen-Dazs and I became a good friend. And to eat Haagen-Dazs because I'm upset is still the same pattern. It still works on the same area of the brain. And I have to look at that. So we don't run to those things anymore. You have to process it. You either process it with a therapist or a good friend or a colleague or something, but you process it.
So I'm wondering, so do you look at yourself, so I'm just trying to,
Sure.
sum up your substance abuse issue, whether, do you think that you're an addict, or, I'm just trying to see how you can summarize, your description of the, your substance abuse issue. And I know that, you want to, you're addressing some of your responsibility.
According to, I mean, I've been in a lot of meetings through the years, since you go 3 times a week. But through that, and also therapy, you learn what your responsibility is. And as far as addiction, yes, there's this pull of I want to run to something to numb me. And I think there always will be. But it's a matter of taking that moment to breathe and say, we don't run to something. Let's talk this out. Let's breathe. I think breathing has been a key thing to the slowdown. And then let's process what's going on rather than going to a substance. But I think that will always be there, so you have to look at that as that is part of how you're made up.
Thank you very much.
All right, sure.
I was wondering if you could just speak briefly to the fact that you tested positive for alcohol, but when I read your report of what happened, you're saying you didn't consume any alcohol, and there was never any explanation as to why you tested positive, but it definitely pushed your probation forward substantially.
Okay. So I did come to that hearing, that particular test, that particular day. It was odd. My urine was a very bright orange. I'd never seen it like that. So they tested it and they found blood in the urine, that particular test that day. Even though it was a test for the BBS, it was also my doctor took a look at it, and I was found to have some kidney problems. So I went to go see, what is it, a nephrologist, I think? Yeah, or whatever they're called, the kidney doctor. That's all I know. And there was problems with my kidneys. So I contested because there had been no alcohol consumed, and I asked them to have it retested. I was told by the Attorney General that they would retest the urine, and so I waited 6-7 months until the hearing, and then only to find out that they had thrown it away. So everything that I had as evidence to retest had been dismissed and thrown away, and I had no explanation other than that particular day. And it's documented that my doctor said there's a problem with your kidneys. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. And we had no medical doctor there. We only had, I believe, PhDs there. So I don't know. And I had nothing there more than to say, I don't know. But it's been the only time that I did. And I had to accept the terms again of what was given to me. And so, again, it was a little bit difficult to absorb, but I love being a therapist, so that's why I did continued on to press forward. And so I was grateful that they at least gave me another chance. Does that help?
Yes. And you didn't really have a problem with alcohol? That wasn't a drug of choice at any point in time?
Never has been, no.
Okay.
But,
Thank you.
prescription medication, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dr. Chu, any questions?
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Betty asked my questions, but I have one other question. Did your therapist recommend early termination? I don't seem to find that letter stating that.
Well, she and I don't discuss board stuff as much, except for, the anxiety that some of it causes. I mean, you have to understand that I'm getting older and sometimes forgetful, so I have to put a big sign, make sure you call in and test or check in, because I don't want to forget. So that causes me just anxiety just to remember to do what I'm supposed to do. But we more or less are talking about my life and how to pull that apart layer by layer and kind of take a look at some of my own history so that I can work on myself.
Okay. The positive alcohol test is still bothering me a little bit. So prior to 2011, the DUI for under the influence of prescription medicine, prior to that, how was your drinking like? Did you drink at all prior to the 2011 episode?
Whenever I have had alcoholic beverages, let me make that clear. In law enforcement, you have to make sure it's alcoholic beverages. My drinking was an occasional glass of wine, maybe. I never was somebody that liked a lot of alcohol or anything like that. So it was always, I was able to put the glass down. It is always, I mean, I would say mostly it was the feeling of the opiate in the prescription medication. That was it. Mhm.
Thank you.
Is that, all right, thank you.
Dr. Wittlisbach, any questions?
My questions have been answered.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Mr. Kim?
Yeah, I have a question. You mentioned about money, maybe as a possible reason for early termination,
Yes.
the cost of healthy eating. And congratulations on losing 50 pounds. That's a significant thing to do. I lost 50 pounds too, so.
Oh,
Yeah. So can you explain further is it like a special diet you're on? I mean, there's many ways to lose weight, but.
okay. Keep me from talking too much. So you call time.
Make sure.
So what happened was I saw a picture of myself. I also do volunteer work with my synagogue as security guard. So I'm Jewish, and on the high holy days, or for Jewish people at synagogues, we do have to have security. And maybe some of you don't understand that, but there are people that have a lot of anti-Semitism, and we have had threats. So because of my prior law enforcement background, I also volunteer there for security as well as for my marriage family therapy internship, which I love. I saw a picture of myself step next to Fernando, the other security guard. And they were saying, who's going to have the baby, you or Fernando? He had a big belly. I had a big belly. And I said, no, I'm not going to look like that anymore. So bottom line, I decided to get into a structured program because structure always works with me. And I called Nutrisystem, and I got on Nutrisystem to start with that. And then I called my girlfriend across the street, who is a sergeant. One of her, I believe her letter is in there, Sergeant Pamela Murphy, or it might be deputy at the time, but she's now sergeant. And I said, come over, I have a Bowflex. Would you start me on exercise? It takes 3 weeks to make a habit. So she came over faithfully every day and exercised with me. So I became consistent again into working out. And suddenly I realized, I don't think I need to spend all the money on the Nutrisystem. I can document this down, what I eat, sort of like what Weight Watchers does. So, I mean, anybody that's heavy really does know how to eat. So now I keep it down to my proteins, my carbohydrates, I log it in, I go in and I exercise with my training partner, and we do our Empowering Women's videos while we train to encourage other people with that, and it kind of keeps the cycle going. So, yeah.
Dr. Brew, any questions?
I have several questions.
Sure.
Okay. My first question is, it says here 7 of the 8 psychotherapy reports were late. Could you speak to that?
The psychotherapy, which ones are those?
The quarterly reports?
Oh, well, I can't speak for my therapist.
Okay.
So I can just tell you that I always remind her, and sometimes she is late on things, but
Okay.
that would have to be addressed with her.
Okay. Another question I had was, how are you different now than when all of that happened before? You've told me some of the behavior changes, and I also want to congratulate you getting healthier, not just with your weight, but in other aspects of your life. But internally, one of the things you mentioned was that you're processing your feelings now in a way that you haven't before. Is there anything else that's different in who you are now compared to who you were in 2011?
Yes. I love myself today.
Okay.
Today I promote self-care. I'm a very grounded woman as far as woman of faith. I don't mean religiously. I mean that I have I call myself faith-based, and that my relationship with God is very personal. And one of the commandments that God has always said, his first commandment was, love God with all your heart, mind, and soul, which I always think we fall short of, because to do that 24/7, I think we miss the mark. But God also said to love others as self. And you can't love another until you love self. And because of past childhood trauma, which, I admit, yeah, unfortunately, had to go through a lot, I have learned self-worth and that I need to love myself as I am. That God loves me as I am, therefore I need to love as I am because that's what he teaches. And I don't think I had that on board.
Okay, thank you. And then the last question I had is, if you were able to have early termination of probation, what, if any, of the terms that you're doing now would stay the same? Would you continue therapy? Would you continue 12-step? What would you continue?
Absolutely.
I know not the urine testing.
Great question.
Yeah.
The only thing that wouldn't be on the plate is the money.
Yeah.
So, but I'm just being, but as far as therapy, I've already told my therapist, I would be here anyway. So no matter what, I believe therapy is good for therapists. It holds you accountable, and there's a lot for us we're still uncovering stuff. So the self-exploration has been a journey, and it's good. So definitely I had been in therapy before, so I would continue that. The AA meetings, I might probe them out to some of the other things. There's one that I'm looking at right now that isn't so much the substance, but it's called SLAW. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's Sex and Love Addiction, or Anonymous, yes. And what it speaks of is the need for quickness in relationships. So I'm kind of looking at that for myself and also other things. So I would go to still the AA or the type of groups with that, but I think I would like to incorporate that, which, I didn't utilize as a sign-off because they want something of substance abuse. So,
Yeah. Has AA been helpful to you?
It has been helpful in the way that, especially the type I go to, a lot of the more women and some of the younger ones I didn't really care for, but the ones that kind of give you the substance of things and understanding. I've done the complete 12 steps, the sponsor, the entire thing, and working the program and understanding exactly what it is. And it's really taking a look at yourself and doing your self-inventory, and you'll do that the rest of your life. Yeah. Sorry, yes. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much.
Sure. All right.
Any questions, Mr. Lamb?
Yes, hi. Thank you
Hi.
for being here.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask a specific question, and in a way, I guess you have already answered it, but how are you dealing now with daily stress and maybe chronic pain if you still have it?
Chronic pain, I've worked through it with the exercise. So the pain that, if there is pain, we're on anti-inflammatory, which is like a Tylenol or an Aleve or something like that. I don't have that same sort of thing. In fact, I crushed this finger in the gym. It is the most beautiful finger I have. It looks deformed, I realize that, but it's the most beautiful finger I have, and I'll tell you why, because I still have it. They put me on pain medication, and I didn't take it right away until it really started hurting. And then I threw the rest of it out when I didn't need it. I've never done that before. That's different. That was unique. And I'm sorry, you asked another question, part of that. How am I dealing with day-to-day stress?
Yes.
Breathing, not making anything, there are no big deals. When I crushed my finger, I couldn't have been more calm, and everybody says, oh, that had to have been the shock. I said, no, that's kind of my day-to-day living. We'll deal with it. I mean, my finger was really messed up, really bad. There was a lot of blood, and I was just calmer than calm. Let's go to the hospital. Let's do what we need to do. Because nothing is really that big a deal. Nothing. It all can be handled, and if we just give it time. So I deal with it much differently. Does that address your question?
It does. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions from board members? Any follow-up questions?
If I
Yes.
just ask one?
Yes.
I'm interested in what happened that allowed you to go from resistance to openness and responsibility? What was that aha moment for you?
It was a slow aha. So it wasn't quite an aha right away. It was realizing that the resistance was actually keeping me from becoming humble. Humbleness teaches us. Pride does not. It was when I stopped being prideful about self and began to realize there's a reason why everybody's saying something about this. So get off your pride. And that's where that moment started happening. And it was somewhere in therapy. And maybe that's where the aha moments were, or maybe even when listening to another client, and absorbing their stuff, and you're taking it in, but you're going, aha, I do that too. A little cross transference, but in a positive way.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes.
Very good. Thank you.
Right, sure.
Any follow-up questions, Ms. Denver? All right, thank you. And based upon the questions that have been asked you, ma'am, do you have any additional testimony that you'd like to provide the board for why the petition should be granted?
The only thing that I would appreciate is that you read my letter, which I'm sure you have, but just to really read it. It's with sincere heart, and to read the people that I find that I'm accountable to. I chose a whole panel of people that aren't necessarily my friends, but people that know me and have to deal with me through either the synagogue or have associated with me in some sort, to take those into consideration as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Then this concludes the hearing in this petition matter, and we'll go off the record. The court reporter will provide you with a document to let you know how you could get a copy of this proceeding if you care to do so in the future. All right. And as I explained earlier, you'll receive your final decision in the mail.
Okay. Thank you again. Seriously. Thank you.
We're off the record. Good afternoon. We're on the record before the Board of Behavioral Sciences, and we're here today to address the petition for early termination for probation filed by James William Gilbert. This is agency case 2002-150-00987, Office of Administrative Hearings, case 2018-080-323. Today is September the 12th, 2018. It's approximately 1:50 p.m. My name is Marilyn Woolard. I'm the Administrative Law Judge from the Office of Administrative Hearings, and I've been assigned to assist the board in this petition hearing. And at this time, I'd ask that the board members identify themselves for the record. If we could start on my right with Ms. Stout.
Vicka Stout, licensed marriage family.
Christine Wong, LCSW member.
Betty Conley, LEP member.
Peter Chu, public member.
Christine Whitlisbach, public member.
Alexander Kim, public member.
Leah Brew, LPCC member.
Gabriel Lam, LCSW member.
And there is a quorum of the board present here today. May I have the appearance of the Deputy Attorney General?
Deputy Attorney General Karen Denver, on behalf of the people of the state of California.
Good morning, good afternoon, Mr. Gilbert. You're here today and you're representing yourself, is that correct?
Yes.
Why don't you pull that microphone a little bit closer? All right, thank you. And you understand you do have a right to be represented at your own expense by counsel?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. So we did have a brief off-the-record conversation this afternoon, and you informed me that you were going to testify on your own behalf, but you did not have any additional witnesses. And you provided me one additional document, is that correct?
I did not provide additional documents.
I'm sorry, I misspoke then. So all of the exhibits that you have wanted the board to consider have already been provided?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. So I know you were here during the previous petition, but just to review briefly, the board's main concern at this time is with looking at your actions since your license was placed on probation to determine your rehabilitation. Ms. Denver, the Deputy Attorney General, will begin by giving us an overview of the evidence we're going to consider in this matter. I will then place you under oath, and you'll have an opportunity to directly address the board and provide them information that you think is relevant to your petition. When you're concluded with that, Ms. Denver may have some questions for you, and the individual board members may also have some questions. When that process is completed, I'll ask if you have any additional testimony that you'd like to provide based upon thoughts that may have been triggered by that question. Any questions about how we're going to proceed today?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. And also, at the conclusion of the hearing, the board, of all the petitions today, the board will go into a closed session to deliberate and to reach a decision on your petition. So you won't find the result today. You'll receive your final decision in the mail.
Okay.
All right. All right, so Ms. Denver, would you care to provide an overview of the evidence in this matter?
Yes, thank you. A statement of issues was filed on November 6, 2015, denying the petitioner's applications for a associate marriage and family therapist registration and an associate professional clinical counselor registration based on 2 criminal convictions, a 2013 driving under the influence conviction with a blood alcohol content of 0.23%, and a 2014 conviction for driving without a license. Pursuant to a stipulated settlement, the petitioner was issued both registrations on March 23, 2016, and they were each placed on probation for a period of 3 years with optional and standard conditions including a psychological evaluation, ongoing psychotherapy, abstain from alcohol and drugs, random testing, attending dependency support program, supervised practice, and maintaining a sponsor through Alcoholics Anonymous. And probation is currently set to end on March 23rd, 2019. Your Honor, I would like to introduce the exhibits at this time.
Yes.
Exhibit 1 is a notice of hearing. Exhibit 2 is the license history certification. Exhibit 3 is the decision and order in this case, along with the statement of issues. Exhibit 4 is Mr. Gilbert's petition for termination of probation, along with the attachments in support of his request. And Exhibit 5 is quarterly psychotherapy reports, and I am requesting that Exhibit 5 be filed under protective seal.
And you have provided me with a request for a protective order and a draft of a protective order. Mr. Gilbert, the purpose of that order is to protect your confidential medical information. Do you have any objection to placing a protective order on Exhibit 5?
I do not, Your Honor.
All right, Exhibit 5 will be placed under protective order. And let me ask you also, we have Exhibits 1 through 5. Do you have any objection to the board considering any of those documents for the purpose of this hearing?
I do not, Your Honor.
All right, Exhibits 1 through 5 are admitted. Let me ask you, sir, to please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth and the whole truth?
I do, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. This is your opportunity to directly address the board by way of testimony about significant portions of your rehabilitation that form the basis for your request for early termination. So you can begin.
So my DUI that occurred February 2013 is by far the largest failure of my life. And it was an event that caused me to reassess my leisure activities, caused me to reassess my friend group, my career, and who I was as a person. I began the process after that occurred of looking at who I was as a person and why that event occurred and how I had gotten to that place. My motivations for drinking, what I was using it for, and what I wanted to do from that point forward. I think, that began my time in 12-step programs. So after that initial DUI, I had to do 12-step programs, and that was kind of my first introduction into that. I didn't initially utilize psychotherapy at the time. I began using psychotherapy when it was suggested by the board in probation, and I think that has really become the most important aspect of my rehabilitation throughout this process. I completed the court's sentencing through the initial DUI, and I attended a 9-month education program. And completed the court's process. So I thought that I had that section of my life completed and began my process of redirecting who I was going to be and focusing on my career and what I wanted to do going forward. So I think it was important in my life, and I think it was helpful in putting into perspective what was important in my life. I'm sorry, let me take a second.
Yeah, please feel free to take your time.
So in high school and in college and undergrad, I had never been much of a drinker. It's not something that I used as a leisure activity. It's not something that I really partook in with friends. And it was something that I tried using in grad school. And I had, throughout my life, I've been on the introverted side of the spectrum. I'm shy, reserved, and through high school and college, I avoided that social anxiety by not going out and not hanging out with large groups, and leaned on the avoidance of that anxiety. In grad school, with this new group of friends, I began using alcohol as a means of alleviating that social anxiety in groups and out. And I quickly learned that that was not a healthy way of alleviating that social anxiety. It led to the DUI, and it led to the situation that I found myself in of really not having appropriate means of dealing with being uncomfortable and being in uncomfortable situations. The DUI was the point where I realized that that was not a method of coping with uncomfortable situations, and that was not an appropriate method of being social and engaging with people in leisure activities. So at that point, I had to find a new method, and it's been a process. And psychotherapy has been very helpful for me in this process with the BBS, and finding a different group of friends was helpful in that process. And I think that I've found I'm much more comfortable in situations that I previously had avoided, and then had used alcohol to be comfortable in. And I think that I have am much more aware of who I am as a person, much more aware of positive coping strategies, and much more focused on what I want to do as a professional and in this helping profession. I think I really have found my niche in the population that I'm working with, the role that I play in working with families and working with young adults and children, And I think I've really come into my own as a person. And this probation period with the BBS has really been instrumental in that. And having the weekly psychotherapy and having, now I have 3 different supervisors that I'm working under to really kind of talk through my cases and talk through how I can best serve my clients. It's a lot, and it has really been a support system in kind of beginning my career as a psychotherapist. So, in a lot of ways, I'm grateful for what's happened and the extra support that this probation has given me, and I think I'm ready to move forward as a professional.
Anything further at this time?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Any questions, Ms. Denver?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Gilbert, it appears you have about 6 months left on your probation term. Why do you want to terminate your probation at this time?
I think, it's expensive. And, right now I have 3 hours of meetings that I'm doing a week. I've got my psychotherapy, my case supervisor, 2 clinical supervisors, and then testing on top of that. So, that's 7 hours of my week that I'm devoting to this, and then, paying for the supervisor and therapy and drug testing. And I'm close to the 3-year period, but the sooner that I can finish, the better, I think.
And do you believe that you're an alcoholic?
I do not. I do not consider myself a substance abuser. I didn't utilize that prior to grad school. It's been really easy to, after that initial incident, to go back to the habits that I had previously of exercising and learning new coping mechanisms. And it hasn't been something that has been difficult. It's been kind of a return to who I think I was before this period where I tried utilizing it.
And if your probation is ended, do you foresee that you will drink alcohol at all, or?
I don't think I'll go to AA meetings. I have developed a really close relationship with my sponsor. So I'll maintain that relationship with my sponsor. I don't think that I will have alcohol. I have a routine where I exercise and I have a healthy diet, and I am comfortable with where I am. But I think having the ability to have champagne at a wedding is something that I am not going to.
We didn't hear the end of your...
I'm not going to refrain from it.
Okay. So do you have a sobriety date as of right now?
I don't have a date, but it's been about 3 years.
And why do you think that you wouldn't repeat that conduct in the future?
I think that I've developed a support system. I've developed coping skills. The situations where I was utilizing alcohol to be comfortable, I am now comfortable in those situations through means of my own. I think I've identified why I was using it and what was not working that I was using it for, and I think that I've developed methods that I no longer need to use those methods.
And would you continue in therapy if your probation is terminated?
Definitely. I think I've really appreciated the therapy. I think I'll probably switch to every other week rather than every week, but it's a major source of support for me. And I've really appreciated the relationship that I've built with my therapist, and I think it's just a positive source of growth that I'll continue.
I have nothing further at this time, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any questions from the board, beginning with Ms. Stout?
Yes, thank you. You say you have means of your own to help control the generalized anxiety or social anxiety. Could you elaborate a little more on that?
I use mindfulness techniques. So my go-to stress reduction is grounding, mindfulness, and I kind of am aware of my environment, aware of my touch and sensory input, so that I am not, I think naturally I tend to kind of spiral into the future and think about whatever possibilities of things that can occur. So I think bringing myself into the moment and centering myself kind of is helpful. So I use breathing techniques and grounding techniques to do that. And then I think just having a really consistent exercise schedule keeps me in a healthy mind spot. I run a lot. That's my major exercise mode, and it's I don't know what I would do without running. It's kind of my recentering.
Very good. Thank you.
Ms. Wong?
Hi. Thanks for coming in. So, I want to hear a little bit more about the sponsor that you have and, the relationship, and whether you guys have a discussion about your alcoholism and what his feedback and opinion about, your alcohol-related trouble.
Yeah. So my sponsor is someone that I actually went to high school with, and then we kind of had gone different ways, and I had heard that he was in the program, and reconnected with him and asked if he wanted to go to meetings with me and be part of this process. And that's been helpful because he has some concept of who I am and some longitudinal view of my trajectory, I guess. And we have a close relationship. And that's something that I think I'll continue. I think we end up now spending time with him. I don't really have any urge to drink. I don't really, it's not something that's kind of part of my existence. So it ends up not being a major discussion of something that we talk about. So we end up talking about, it ends up kind of being like therapy, and we spend time talking about life and talking about the BBS probation, and it kind of ends up being a form of therapy. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So another follow-up question is about you talked about your social anxiety.
Yeah.
And so you used to use alcohol, to fit in and, have the peer groups and stuff. And so how is it how do you deal with your social anxiety now? What are the ways that you, try to overcome it?
Right. So, I've found a different friend group, and the people that I was with, that was kind of their mode of decompressing at the end of the week. And that just wasn't working for me and didn't work for me in this situation. So I found friend groups that engage in other activities. And, I'm very interested in my hobbies. I am very interested in cars and racing. And I have a group of friends that, on Saturday and Sunday, we're up at 6 in the morning and driving or going to the racetrack. And there's just not space in my life for that same drinking and going out the way that I had tried at that period of time. I've developed a different structure that doesn't utilize that. Mm-hmm.
Chair Connolly, any questions?
Yeah, I'm trying to decide, thank you for coming. I'm trying to decide how to formulate this. You've said a few times that that you learned that it's not a healthy way of addressing your feelings. I mean, you've made that point.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you came to that realization because of the DUI and basically all the consequences that followed.
Yes.
what would have happened if you hadn't gotten a DUI? Would you just kind of merrily kept on drinking
That's-
pretty excessively?
That's a good question. I don't know. You know, I think that at the time I was aware that type of, the friend group that I was with and that type of recreation wasn't something I was completely comfortable with. So I think eventually I would have decided that, you know, this isn't the group of friends that I want to be involved with, and this isn't what I would like to keep doing. I think that at the time, that's who was around, and I think that that's the peers that I had in the grad program that I was in, and that's, I feel like I kind of had a choice between this group of friends that were doing these things, or not having a peer group. You know, I would like to think that if things had continued without the DUI, I would have found the friend group that I have now, and I would have gone back to the hobbies and technique and life that I had been interested in before this period, I think. So I'm not sure, but I would like to think that I would have found where I would have come to the space that I'm at today without that, I think.
So you basically identify as a pretty different person now, kind of 6 years ago you were a student, you said that, you were 24, you were,
Right.
graduate school.
Right, you know, I was 24 years old at the time. I'm 30 now. I'm in a very different place in my life. You know, I hadn't really started my career. I was in school, and now I really have a career and a private practice, and I work with an agency, and I really have a different life and a trajectory and a goal that I really value, and I kind of have a focus on where I want to be, and you know, I'll do what it takes to maintain this trajectory, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Choi?
Thank you. Thanks for being here. You mentioned that you drank because of the social situation. What I'm thinking is whether in the future, will there be other situation like stress or anything else might drive you to drink? So I would like to hear from you about your coping skills, just in case there might be other things happen in your life in the future.
Sure. Yeah, you know, in the past 2.5 years, I've experienced some really tumultuous times. Excuse me. This process with the board and with my probation has been difficult. And I think, and particularly about a year ago, I went through a breakup with someone that I had been with for years, that I kind of had seen a certain path with in life, and really had everything kind of turned upside down. So I think that kind of put into practice the techniques that I had been training, that I had learned, and put into practice my coping skills, and it was fine. You know, I utilized my psychotherapy. I utilized my sponsor. I utilized meetings. I utilized my support system, and I really found the coping skills that I had put in place to be effective in you know, when put to the test. So I think I have myself in place, and I think I will be able to continue that.
I'm sorry, what are the skills other than going to the sponsors and to your therapist?
I use mindfulness techniques as an anxiety reduction. So I use breathing techniques, grounding, and my anxiety kind of builds up, and I tend to look towards the future and get ahead of myself. So I use techniques that bring me into the present, that that reduce anxiety, and then my exercise regimen maintains myself at an even keel, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Wheatless-Bach, any questions?
No, thank you.
Mr. Kim?
Yeah, so you mentioned about, it's only 6 more months, which is relatively, some would argue, a short time. So, and you mentioned that you have a busy schedule that's wanting you to terminate this probationary period. So can you go into further what meetings that you're talking about? Is it, professional, I assume? And are they causing any social anxiety?
So when I say meetings, I am referring to the AA meetings. So I have, as part of my probation, I have to attend 3 AA meetings a week. So I end up usually doing that on Saturday. So I kind of have 2 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon. That I have a group that I go with. So, that kind of takes up my Saturday. And then I pretty much have something spread out each evening of the week between my supervisors, clinical supervisors, and my case supervisor, and then psychotherapy. So, yeah, it's just 7 hours a week that is devoted to my responsibilities with this. And then on top of that, testing. So, if I call in and I have to test that day. So I work at an agency that works with LAUSD school cases, and then I have trying to start private practice as well. So I have a pretty packed schedule there. So, if I have to test that day, that's extra time that I have to go to the testing location. It can take around an hour to get in and get out. So it ends up being just a lot of time and monetary contribution every week that I'd like to stop.
Thank you. No further questions.
Dr. Brew?
No questions.
Mr. Lamb, any questions?
I don't have any questions.
Thank you. Any follow-up, Ms. Denver? Any follow-up questions from the board members? And Mr. Gilbert, based on those questions, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, if I could just ask you guys to look at the reference letters that I've submitted. I have reference letters from my therapist, my supervisors, the volunteer organization that I work with, which is Operation Walk. They provide hip and knee replacements to low impoverished countries throughout the world, and I've gone with them and volunteered my support. The last one I went to was Guatemala. So, I served in working with the patients before and after surgery, and utilizing my training and skills in a volunteer capacity that I think is important. So there's a letter from the director of that in there, and I think that if you look at the letters and the I think heartfelt endorsement of my character and my efforts in rehabilitation, I think if you look at that as a whole package, or I just ask you to look at that as a whole package, I guess.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So as I explained earlier, the board will go into executive session to reach a determination on your petition after we've concluded all the petition hearings today, and you'll receive your final decision in the mail. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much.
We're off the record, and let's take a 5-minute break before we proceed with Mr. Myers. Yes. Mr. Gilbert, he'll give you a piece of paper about how to get a copy of the transcript of the proceeding if you can. Let's go back on the record. Good afternoon. We're on the record before the Board of Behavioral Sciences, Department of Consumer Affairs, and we're here today in the matter of the petition for early termination of probation filed by Jake David Myers, petitioner. This is agency case 2002-140-00145, Office of Administrative Hearings case 2018-080-321. Today is September the 12th, 2018. It's approximately 2:30 p.m. My name is Marilyn Woolard. I'm the administrative law judge assigned to assist the board in this matter. And may I have the board members identify themselves for the record, beginning with Ms. Stout.
Vika Stout, LMFT.
Christine Wong, LCSW member.
Betty Conley, LEP member.
Peter Chu, public member.
Christine Whitlisbach, public member.
Alexander Kim, public member.
Leah Brew, LPCC member.
Real Lam, LCSW member.
And thank you. There is a quorum of the board present for today's hearing. May I have the appearance of the Deputy Attorney General?
Deputy Attorney General Karen Denver on behalf of the people of the state of California.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Myers, you're here today and you're representing yourself, is that correct?
Correct.
And you understand you do have a right to be represented by counsel at your own expense?
Correct.
All right, thank you. So we did have an off-the-record discussion, and you did indicate that you would be the only witness testifying on your behalf today, is that correct?
Yes.
And you also did provide us with an additional one-page letter dated September 11th, 2018, from Cindy Weathers, LMFT. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's been marked for identification as Exhibit 7, and all of the board members have been provided with a copy of that document. So I know you've sat through two of the previous petition hearings, you've heard the instructions, but just to reiterate briefly, the board is concerned today with hearing about your efforts towards rehabilitation since your license was placed on probation. Ms. Denver will begin by giving us an overview of the evidence in this case. After that, I'll place you under oath, and you'll have an opportunity to address the board members directly about the specific reasons why you believe your petition should be granted. When you feel that you've said what you'd like to say, I'll open it up for questioning by Ms. Denver and the board members. When we've concluded with that, I'll give you an opportunity to add any testimony that questioning may have triggered in your own mind. Any questions about how we'll proceed?
Nope.
All right, thank you. All right, so then at this time, Ms. Denver, would you care to begin with your presentation?
Thank you. On November 7th, 2011, Mr. Myers was issued a marriage and family therapist registration. On March 2nd, 2015, an accusation was filed based on a 2013 criminal conviction for driving under the influence with a .13 blood alcohol content. Pursuant to a stipulated settlement, on September 4th, 2015, petitioner was placed on probation for a period of 5 years with optional and standard conditions including ongoing psychotherapy, abstaining from alcohol and drugs, random urine analysis, attending dependency support program, and a relapse prevention program. On September 7th, 2015, petitioner was issued, the first one was an intern. In 2015, he was issued a marriage and family therapist license, and his probation term and conditions were transferred to that license. In 2017, the petitioner sought a modification of his probation to eliminate the condition requiring random drug testing. On April 21st, 2017, the elimination of this requirement was denied, but he was granted a modification reducing the frequency of random urinalysis from 4 to 6 times a month to once a month. And probation is currently set to end on September 4th, 2020. Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to go through the exhibits.
Yes, please do.
Exhibit 1 in the binder is the notice of hearing. Exhibit 2 is the license history certification. Exhibit 3 is the decision and order along with the accusation. Exhibit 4 is Mr. Myers' petition for early termination of probation, along with documents submitted in support of his request. Exhibit 5 is the April 21st, 2017 decision in the earlier petition to modify probation. And Exhibit 6 is a copy of the quarterly psychotherapy reports, and I've requested that Exhibit 6 be filed under a protective seal.
And then, as we've indicated previously, Exhibit 7 is the letter
Yes,
from
I
Ms. Weathers. All right, so do you have any objection, Mr. Myers, to placing Exhibit 6 under a protective order?
No.
All right. That order the requested order is appropriate and will be granted. Anything further, Ms. Denver?
No.
All right. Mr. Myers, would you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth and the whole truth?
I do.
Thank you. So this is your opportunity to address the board, and when you feel that you've said what you'd like to say, let us know, and I'll open it up for questioning.
Okay. Thank you for letting me be here. I really wanted the numbers and the evidence here to kind of speak for themselves in terms of my rehabilitation and everything that I've done since being on probation and since the incident that led me to be on probation. The first is that I've now completed 3 full years of the probation, 3 out of the 5 years, including all the biological fluid testing, which was multiple times a month and now is once a month. Never missing one test, never obviously failing one test. But more importantly than that, I actually started my journey of sobriety way before this probation even started. So I currently have 5.5 years of sobriety, and I'm sober today not because of what happened and not because I'm a therapist on probation, but because I came to that decision well before all of this started happening in terms of the repercussions of the incident. It was actually like 2.5 years after the DUI before the board began to process what happened. So I actually got sober a few months after the event with the DUI and continued all the way through now. So I really feel like, 5.5 years is really significant in terms of an amount of time to be sober. I feel I'm going to continue one day at a time, and I am in Alcoholics Anonymous. I have a sponsor, I have sponsees, and it's been 6 years since the actual event occurred that led to my probation, obviously with no subsequent problems. So, I really do, again, feel that those numbers speak for themselves. I feel like you can get up here and say a lot of different things, but it's the evidence and the numbers that really show the proof of what's happening. In addition to those facts, other things that I feel are important are I got married a couple of years ago, and my husband is also sober, so we have a sober household, which is an extra layer of protection and in terms of feeling, committed to this. We bought a house together in the last year. In addition, through my therapy, which I am planning on continuing after all of this, I've really been stepping up my meditation. So I do meditation every day now for 20 minutes in the morning. And I feel like I'm able to get through life and, the ups and downs of life sober. And, I just attended my sister's wedding last Sunday, which was intense, like going to a wedding and, my husband and I were the only ones not drinking. But knowing that I can get through those kinds of things, which are my biggest triggers, I feel, like this is a long-term thing for me. It's a permanent thing for me. and I don't feel that I'm at risk to relapse. I know that you asked the previous people why do you want to end your probation early? And I did want to mention that besides the fact that it just simply doesn't feel in sync with who I am now and where I am in my life, like, sometimes I'm in these clinics for my drug testing and it feels so foreign, like it feels so long ago that I was drinking and using, and it feels so just not in tune with the rest of my life. But besides that, my husband and I are thinking about moving to Florida because my mom is getting older and isn't in the best health, and his parents are even older and also aren't in the best health. And they're all on the East Coast. And I have kind of looked in a little bit to what it would mean to do that, to actually get licensed in another state. And I think it's going to be very difficult with a license that's not in good standing in California, that's on probation. And so I would probably wait until my probation's finished before I even start the process of trying to get licensed in another state or taking the national exam, just because it seems like it would be a lot of difficulty to try to navigate that process. So, I'm asking for my probation to be terminated early so that I have the freedom to do that if we decide to do that in the next year or so. Like I said, we just bought a house, but we had to be out of where we were. So it probably wouldn't be right away, but it is something we're seriously thinking about because of our parents and a couple other reasons. And, obviously probation's expensive, but that's part of the deal, and that's not why I'm asking to terminate. In fact, if I were to terminate, I'd be willing to pay the full amount of expenses for the 5 years of probation, even though I've only completed 3, just to kind of, if that was a factor at all, I'm willing to do that. And I think that is, the last thing I wanted to say is that my therapist also has requested or feels that I can be terminated in my probation early. So she submitted a letter stating that, and there's also a letter from my sponsor reiterating that I work with him regularly. And then, like I mentioned, my 5 years sober, there's a copy of my 5-year chip in there. I wanted to bring some kind of evidence that this is actually happening and that I am sober. So I got that at one of my regular meetings that I go to. So that's all.
Thank you. Any questions, Ms. Denver?
Yes. So you do believe that you're an alcoholic?
I do.
Okay. And what is your sobriety date?
March 10th, 2013.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And I know your arrest for the DUI was August 25th of 2012. What happened between your arrest and when you became sober?
I was interning, and I told my supervisor what happened, and he actually sort of like raised the seriousness of all of this for me and was like, what are you going to do differently? You're now a therapist, and this is, you can't be doing these kinds of things. And I just sort of like surrendered fully. And it wasn't the first time I've gotten sober. I'd actually gotten sober once before. And, but I did it sort of unwillingly and with resistance. And then drank again. And this happening was sort of like, aha, okay, like I really am an alcoholic. I can't escape this thing. I thought maybe that because I wasn't doing drugs anymore and I was only drinking, that maybe it would be manageable, but it clearly wasn't manageable. So I, came to the decision that I'm just going to go back to Alcoholics Anonymous. And he also was saying, my supervisor, I want to see that you're doing something too, because I'm not even sure if I'm comfortable working with you anymore under my license, So that was another like part of the wake-up call of like, this is really serious. So that's why I went back and decided to be sober on my own.
Okay. And will you continue with AA if your probation is ended?
Definitely.
And if you move to the East Coast, you'll continue with AA?
Definitely,
What about therapy? Will you continue with that?
definitely.
Okay. So it's been 5.5 years? So do you feel that you're in a completely different place than you were then?
Completely, yeah.
And so you are hoping to terminate your probation early so that you have the option to try to get licensed elsewhere?
Correct. In addition to just not feeling that it's sort of in sync with where I am and who I am anymore in my life. And, there are logistical, stressors in terms of the probation of getting the quarterly reports in and going to biological fluid testing. I still have to, even though I'm only once a month now, I have to check every single day. So it's like this thing that I have to, worry about and deal with every single day until the day of the test that month. So overall, it would be easier in general, of course, to not have to be on the probation. But the biggest thing is wanting my license to sort of be clean in case that we need to make a move.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the board, beginning with Ms. Stout?
I don't have any questions, but congratulations on your 5-year chip.
Thank you.
Ms. Wong?
Yes. Thanks for coming up here to the board again. So you mentioned that, this is the second time, the second episode for staying clean and sober. So how long did you stay clean and sober for the last episode?
The first time?
Uh-huh.
It was 2.5 years. And like I said, I had been using drugs the first time. And so I convinced myself, and I realize now that's part of alcoholism and the disease is, a tricky mind. I convinced myself that alcohol alone wouldn't be a problem. And so I, distanced a little bit from 12-step. I stopped going to as many meetings. I stopped calling my sponsor. And then I started to drink again. And I stayed managing my drinking for several years before this happened. But actually, and I said this, I think, last time I was here, the DUI I really look at it now as a gift because it kind of kicked me into gear and forced me to realize what's important and to get sober again. And then once I did, I was like, oh, why was I resisting this for so long? It's actually, there's so much freedom in it, and it's much easier to not be trying to manage my drinking every single day or every single week, to just be free and clear of it and not have to worry about that, is freeing. So,
Can you tell me more about what you mean by managing?
Yeah, so I thought, I said quote around the word managing because in my mind I was convincing myself that I was able to drink responsibly when I went back out of the program. But looking back, I really wasn't. I was having to be very, very conscious of how much I was consuming. I had to kind of white knuckle, when I would try to tell myself no more tonight, I would be white knuckling even though I wanted to drink more. I would sort of force myself not to. And so, and then, I was acting irresponsibly still. I was drinking and driving, things like that. So I wasn't truly managing it even though I tried to convince myself of that.
And that was the time when you had your DUI, right?
Yes, exactly. The DUI was the end of that period.
Right. And so now you're staying clean and sober for 6 years?
5.5.
5.5.
As of last March, it was 5 years.
Wonderful. And so, you did, talk about that, you were here last year.
Mm-hmm.
So, why did you keep coming back? I know that, you explained that, you wanted to get a license in Florida, but, last time you were asking to reduce, to reduce the, some of the terms and conditions, and this time you're asking for terminations. Tell us about the purpose, I mean, it just seems like, you really wanted to get it, you're not going to give up until we,
Well, I mean, I think this is actually going to be the last time that I'm able to request of the probation to be terminated because after the decision comes in, and then it's like another year that you have to wait, and then you have to petition for that, and then get approved for the next date. It's going to be almost towards the end of 2 more years anyway. And so I prefer to come in now and really show you guys the truth of who I am and how much I've changed and what's been going on in terms of the factual numbers in terms of how much I've been sober, et cetera, and hope that you guys see that and then, be able to, again, have the opportunity if we move to get licensed in another state cleanly and not be sort of feeling like I'm doing something that doesn't feel like it fits who I am anymore.
Thank you.
Chair Connolly?
I don't have any questions. Thank you for coming in.
Dr. Chu?
No questions. Thank you for coming in.
Dr. Weissenbeck?
There's snakes and alligators in Florida, right?
I know.
Just kidding. No, I'm not kidding. They really are there, but you know that. My question is, how long have you been with the sponsor that you're currently with?
I had one different sponsor in this 5.5-year period. I had one different sponsor actually 2. I had one for about 8 months, and then I had one for another 6 months, and then the remainder of the time has been with this sponsor. So like 4 of the years, something like that, 3.5.
Okay. And you've done the steps, obviously. Well, what step are you on right now?
I'm back to step 1, so we go around.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, around and around. Okay. All right. Thank you. And thanks for coming back. I remember you from last time and get a different vibe this time. So good work.
I hope.
Mr. Kim, any questions?
I have no questions.
Ms. Brew? Dr. Brew?
You keep saying how it doesn't fit with who you are anymore. So tell me, how are you different, even from a couple years ago, to who you are today? Not your habits, but internally.
Yeah. It's a deeper sense of acceptance and surrender around this new way of life and this identity as an alcoholic. I think it's just so woven now deeply into every part of my life that it's who I am. And, like I said, my husband is sober, so everything, we do is sober, except for when we go to crazy weddings where everyone's drinking. But we stay sober, and that's an extra layer of support. But it's just part of who I am, and I can't even imagine, and I know it happens, and that's why you have to continue working every day on a program, but I can't even imagine feeling in a place where I would want to jeopardize my life that it is today and drink again. And I feel like I'm much more successful as a therapist in a private practice because I'm sober. I feel like my relationships are healthier. There was sort of like a wall kind of almost between me and people when I was still drinking. I feel more connected. I think it's just a deeper acceptance.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Lamb, any questions?
I do have a couple of questions for you. I suppose my first one is optional, because it's leading to the second question. What sort of client population do you work with? And my second question is, how do you deal with transference?
I work with adults for the most part. I have seen teens, but very minimally. So I work with adults, a lot of LGBTQ people, and I work with a lot of addiction, people that are either contemplating recovery or already in recovery. So I would say those are kind of my two, the main focus of what I work with. As far as transference, can you say more about the question?
Yes, if you're dealing with people who are in recovery or contemplating recovery, you being recovering yourself, do you ever find it difficult managing the issues that are brought on to you because you've been there, you've done that, and does that maybe lead you to think, well, maybe I should use, or what am I doing here trying to help people who are wanting to recover if I'm recovering myself?
I feel that I have the experience of being on both sides of the fence, meaning I know what it feels like to be drinking and using. I know what it feels like to be resistant to changing and getting sober. And I also know what it feels like to go through something traumatic and get to the other side and sort of surrender and then work a program and become sober. And I know what it feels like to be in that whole process. So I think that gives me benefit when I'm working with people with addiction because, you know, if somebody, for example, I have a client now who who's in a lot of denial and doesn't want to really change and get sober, but I remember what that feels like. So I'm not jumping and rushing and saying, well, you need to go to 12-step right now, because for me, it took a lot of sort of like easing into to get there and a lot of different things happening in order to feel comfortable enough to do something like that. So I feel like I'm able to be in tune with that and help people move in the direction that they want to move in.
Thank you. Wonderful answer. Thank you.
Any further questions, follow-up questions from the board? No? Hearing none. Ms. Denver, any follow-up questions? And do you have any follow-up testimony that you'd like to give in support of your petition?
I don't think I do. I think I said everything.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Myers. So as I explained previously, the matter will be taken under submission, a decision will be reached, and you'll receive your final decision in the mail. All the evidence has been in, a protective order will be issued, and you can receive some information from the court reporter about how to get a copy of this proceeding. So we'll go off the record for now. Thank you very much. Good luck to you, sir.
And with that, the board will move into closed session.